What do you say to them, or people who say, this happened so long ago, why don't you get over it?
We're calling the Canadian and American citizens, we're calling them settlers. Hollywood's romanticized that term settler, right? If you look in the dictionary, settler has a very different meaning to what we're applying to the Canadian citizens today. A settler technically is a new immigrant. With somebody that lived in another country, then they came here. But if you're born in this country, you're a member of a colony, so you're a colonist. And even if you are a settler coming to this new country, you come under the premise of integrating into being a member of the colony, Canadian or America. So you're not a colony. You're not coming here as a settler. You're coming here as a colonist. With everyone calling each other settlers, right? That's a misconception. We've got to use a proper language to understand our positions, right, in this country, on this continent. With First Nations peoples, we are originally the true stewards of this land, right? So keep referring to us as Canadian or citizens of the colonies is wrong, right? That's just a form of assimilation, right? And assimilation isn't all that bad, right? Progress isn't bad in itself. Technology isn't bad in itself. But how are we presenting those technologies, and how are we, with the economy and all that, how are we engaging in these systems? There is a problem right there, right? Indigenous laws needs to be respected and need to be integrated into the Canadian system as well, because as it stands, as I said earlier, it's all about the economy, and our health, the public health is being sacrificed for the economy. I was conditioned to be ashamed of my Indigenous heritage, my Indigenous culture, right, sort of thing. And because of the shame I held towards my own family and my own culture, I aspired to be like what society had told us to be like. Our responsibilities to each other and to the land and to our resources, good stewardship of our resources, have been replaced with this false idea that the economy is the most important aspect to our lives, and that's the detriment not just to my family and the Indigenous people, but to all people, right?
I saw how easily these systems can be changed, but also an unwillingness to even discuss root problems such as colonial corporatocracy and white supremacy, as well as many hard but necessary solutions to address these issues, like reinstating the sovereignty of this continent back to those who inherently know how to steward these lands properly. Just as millions dare to reimagine a healthy, sustainable future for our children, but rarely does one seem willing to sacrifice any contemporary, non-essential luxuries. There are those that say of us who do this work are quite jaded and full of doom and gloom. That is a problem we have into a more positive outlook on life, and to some degree, I'm sure that's true. But choosing to look at, I mean really look at, and try to unravel all the mechanisms creating such an unbalanced society can take its toll. Yet just who are we to enjoy the ignorance of oppression when we are intrinsically linked to and benefit from that oppression?
Well, the Indigenous people, we don't have our land, do we? Right? We don't have authority over our lands. We still don't have authority over our own children. You take a look at the child care system, right? We're still far overrepresented. We get over that, right? We don't have say over our resources, and the racism, it's still ongoing, right? The fisheries and the lobsters, what's happening in Nova Scotia, what's happening on the West Coast. Does it seem like it's over? Like it's in the past? It's still going on today with all the resource extraction projects and everything. It's never going to be over until we have control over our own lands.
Correspondingly to past and modern day treaties, the U.S. and Canada does not recognize these as treaties between two sovereign nations, which was the original spirit and intent, as outlined by one of the first wampum belts to celebrate treaty between the Haudenosaunee and the Dutch upon European arrival in North America. The wampum was to ensure that Europeans and First Nations, while living side by side on the same land, would not interfere in each other's independent affairs. One example of this callous regard for spiritually binding treaty making is the case of the Micmac Tribal Society versus Canada, brought before the UN Human Rights Committee in 1980 in which Canada argued, international, American, and Canadian law do not recognize treaties with North American Native people as international documents confirming the existence of tribal societies as independent and sovereign states. These treaties are merely considered to be nothing more than contracts between a sovereign and a group of his subjects.
Canada, America, and the Indigenous peoples there. The only way I can see us moving forward with good relations is that, well, Indigenous people, we need to have our sovereignty over this continent returned to us. That's the only thing. And Indigenous laws, like I said, Indigenous laws being integrated into the colonial laws as well, because we can't carry on like this. Our society, the diseases, COVID, and then global warming or climate change, or however people like to refer that to. These are really serious issues, right? And that's tied. Our environmental issues, our issues with corruption in corporations, all that is tied to the doctrine of discovery. This idea of progress, the idea of civilization, and the idea of consumerism, right? All that has got to change, because we're the trajectory we're on a path of destruction, for everyone. We're in the 6th greatest extinction level event in mankind's history, right? And that's tied to the economy. That's tied to our energy infrastructure. All of that is tied to the past, right? It's all tied to colonization, the doctrine of discovery. That doctrine of discovery, it's embedded in Canadian property laws, in the American property laws. It's used in our courts to justify who owns the land, crown land, and all that. So it's not in the past. We're living it today.
If we're truly serious in stemming the tide of racially motivated crimes and the possibility of ecological collapse due to global warming, it only makes sense to understand that the doctrine of discovery's message of prosperity through oppression is the true basis of all our blessings on this continent. And so we must ask ourselves just what sort of a legacy we are willing to leave behind. Today's society is so conditioned to focusing primarily on what's right in front of us in nearly every area of our lives, including our spiritual practices, that we unwittingly place our faith in often false security blankets, such as insurance companies, extended warranties, investment firms, and church altars. Then there's the banking system, business and personal loans, metal crosses, and consumer debt. Yeah, that's right. Debt is also rationalized in modern-day economics as a security blanket, simply because debt is the means by which our current system prints more money, thus creating more quote-unquote prosperity, though countered through inflation. Anyway, we have all this foolishness which results in our being utterly consumed with the struggles of life than actually living. Then in turn, when faced with a negative societal issue like racism, we try to specifically deal with the symptoms rather than going after the root cause which produces these issues in the first place.